About a year and a half after we moved here from Colorado, Michael was teaching and living a really active lifestyle. He loved to rock climb, and I did it with him. We had a lot of fun rock climbing and hiking and all that sort of stuff. He got a cough, and the cough got worse and turned into bronchitis, and we were just kind of waiting for that for him to get better from that. And one morning he woke up and said, "Wow, I slept really well." He hadn't been sleeping very, very well because of all the coughing. He said, I slept really, really well. Only I feel like I slept too well and I can't move. I helped Michael, propped him up in a chair and said, "Are you going to be okay? I'm going to take Tobias to his doctor's appointment." And I came back, like 2-3 hours later with Tobias, and Michael's sitting in the same chair. And one thing led to the next. I couldn't pick him up at that point. I couldn't even assist him with walking. So we called, was it Mark, your brother? He was a student at EI at the time, and he came running over, and he helped me with moving Michael, and we realized that this was not normal, needed to get him to a doctor. By that evening, he was in the neuro ICU of Greenville Memorial Hospital. Called our shepherding group, said, "Please pray. We don't know what's going on. I think Michael's going paralyzed."
I just kept losing more and more motor control. By the evening, I couldn't even raise my arm to my face. Within 3 days, I was placed on a ventilator because the muscles to my lungs quit working. And basically, I was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder called Guillain-Barré syndrome. And it's where the immune system attacks your nervous system and strips the coating off of your nerves. And that keeps the brain from sending messages to your muscles and causes you to go paralyzed. And so my immune system just kept on attacking my nerves and destroying my nerves, and I was just going more and more paralyzed. I kept going downhill for the next few weeks, to the point where really the only thing I could move on my body were the irises of my eyes. And that's how I would communicate with people.
We had a chart with a lot of questions back in front, and he could kind of indicate by moving his eyes which question it was when we would point, or we had the ABC spelled out, and every time he'd wiggle his eyes when we'd go over that letter, we knew that was the letter. And first we made a lot of mistakes, and it could be really frustrating, but eventually we got pretty good at spelling, and that's how we were able to communicate for the next number of months.
After about a month or so, I hit my lowest point. Well, about the lowest point. They decided to send me to a long-term acute center to try to get me weaned off the ventilator. That was the big goal, because the longer you stay connected to the ventilator, the more dependent you become. And so that was the focus. We got to the acute center. They started weaning me. They hit me pretty hard, just 2 hours today, 4 hours the next day, 6 hours the next day, 8 hours, and on and on and on. But what they didn't realize, that my body was too weak to actually come off that ventilator. I wasn't at the point where they could really wean me off, and so my body ended up collapsing under all the exercise. And really what was affected was my heart. My heart rate started to go crazy. There were several times, 2 or 3 times, where my heart rate just started to go down, 80, 60, 40, 30, 20. It was just, my heart rate was going out, and I was blacking out, and I was thinking, well, this is it. This is the way people die. So those were real days of uncertainty, whether I would even live or not.
Yeah.
But eventually I started to stabilize. They stopped all efforts to wean me off the ventilator. I started to stabilize somewhat. They just let me rest. And for months, I was just laying in a bed, unable to move anything, just trying to survive, really.
At about 5 months, they decided to do some more testing to take him back to the main hospital. So they took him back to Greenville Memorial and did some more testing. And I remember watching as they stuck these long probes into his arms, and the screen was doing nothing. And I kept thinking, I guess I just don't know how to read it. And they said, no, actually, there's nothing. He has 0 to recover. There's nothing left to recover. And it was shortly after that the doctor came in to our room and very quickly and friendly like just said, actually this is probably where he's going to be, and he's going to be ventilator dependent for the rest of his life. We kind of were like, did he just say what we thought he said? And it was hard to take, but at that point I wrote an email out to everybody that we knew who was praying, and we had a Facebook page that a lot of people kept up with, and I put that out there just saying, this is what they're saying, but we serve a God who can do more than that, and that might not be his will, but I ask you to pray. In
less than a month I was off the ventilator.
Yeah.
So I just made rapid progress from that point. I was almost like God was waiting for the doctor to say,
it can't happen.
You won't, you're going to be like this the rest of your life. And then from that point on, he's just like, okay, that's not what I want for you. And he just strengthened my lungs, and I started to breathe on my own again. Mm-hmm. That was a huge, huge breakthrough. But I was still extremely weak. I was breathing, but I was still unable to even really lift. I couldn't even lift my arms off the bed. So we were sent home that way, very weak.
After 7 months in the hospital?
7 months in the hospital. And started doing physical therapy, occupational therapy, and very, very slowly started to regain. We were never quite sure how much I would regain, because your body gets to a point where it decides, hey, you're good, you're healthy, you've got enough, the healing's over. And we weren't sure at what point my body would say, I'm done healing.
This is October 8th. We're at home. This is Erin, the occupational therapist. That's Tobias dropping things in the kitchen. And Michael can move his arms.
There you go.
From the bed to his lap.
I kept progressing for probably the next year or so, and we were encouraged. We were wondering, maybe I'll walk again, and maybe I'll get back to pretty much normal again. And until there came a point where everything just started to plateau, and for the next few months, I made no more progress.
He had to be discharged from physical therapy because he wasn't making progress on the charts. They have to make a certain amount of progress. They kind of determined, okay, well, I guess you're done. And so that was a hard point.
It was a hard point, and it, that's the point where we had to start kind of move from hope of recovery to acceptance of what God has done and where He's placed us. And that transition from moving ahead, hoping, to acceptance. And it was a difficult transition, and one where there's a lot of grief over loss, real loss that has occurred, things that we would never do again, things I wouldn't be able to do with our kids, and that begins to hit you. And as long as you're making progress, who knows? Maybe I'll get all better again, but when it all stops and you realize, okay, this is what I have to live with now the rest of my life, very possibly, very likely. And that was a difficult transition. It was a period of grief in stages.
At first, a lot of people would come to me saying, oh, I bet you're just devastated. And I wasn't. I really felt like God was carrying me in a really, really big way, and in a way that I could feel was not me. A quote from Nancy Lee DeMoss kept coming to my mind, that God does not give grace for the hypothetical. And my mind just wouldn't go there. But there was still questions that could come. Is he going to live? If he lives, is he going to be always breathing on a machine? If he's not, is he going to be able to walk again? All of those were questions. And I think a big aspect that brought in a lot of questions and uncertainty was our son Tobias as well. That was is he going to have a daddy who can throw him in the air? Is he going to have a daddy who can play sports with him? What's our family even going to look like now? Like, those were questions and things that were very uncertain in my mind during that time. But once again, I can testify to God's just keeping me in a place of not going down that path too far. Just really clinging to the fact that whatever happens, God is good. And that whatever happens, He's going to give us the grace for that. I feel like my mind became very simple during those times because it was just very cluttered by so much going on that just clinging to simple truths that God is good. God is always good, even if it doesn't look like He's good. And God is sovereign. He's got this. Something that we said was his hand is on the thermostat. He controls how hot it gets. He knows how hot we can take it, and He's got it. It's not going to go hotter. So just clinging to the fact that He is sovereign. He's good. He's got this. Like I said, I think my mind just got very simple at those times.
There was a lot of uncertainty in every way. Life is uncertain. All of life is uncertain. But particularly in moments like that, the first was whether I would ever live, whether I would even live through this, whether I would survive. I would remember asking Marie, do we need to talk about this? Do we need to talk about the fact that I might die here? And Marie would always be like, no, we don't need to talk about this. It's not now. And this uncertainty of the finances incurred by such, and that's weighed somewhat on our minds here and there. How is this going to be taken care of? The uncertainty of whether I would ever come off the ventilator, as the doctor said I might not ever come off. The uncertainty of how far I would progress once I did come off the ventilator, and all along, I think Marie and I were very conscious of the reality that God doesn't owe any of this to us. That if I die, He's still faithful. That if I am ventilator dependent the rest of my life, He's still good, He's still faithful. He hasn't contradicted His word or been unfaithful to His word. So we were very conscious of that all the way through, that God hasn't promised us a perfect, comfortable, easy life. And so the question more was, God, how far are you going to take this? And for what purpose? What are you doing? And I think that for both of us, it was kind of this curiosity as to, God, what are you doing? Because we don't know fully what God is always up to. We're weak. We don't see the big picture. We don't know what's going on fully. And yet, as Marie said, there were two bedrock truths that in a sense grounded me. Simple truths. God is good. God is sovereign. He's in control. And so He's working all this for good. And in the moment, that was hard I clung to it, but it was hard to understand, hard to perceive, hard to believe. I don't want to communicate that this whole time was just easy. I had times of despair. I had times where I just wept, times where I couldn't control my emotions. People would come in and say, "Oh, I bet you have such a great prayer life." They're laying on your bed, in agony, and really, I couldn't speak back, and that was a mercy, because I don't know what I would have said. Really, the only prayer I could pray from much of the time was, "God, help me, just help me. I need help." I don't know, I couldn't really. My thoughts were not always very clear.
All right, this is January 28th. Tobias is being fussy, but Michael is trying to feed himself for the first time. All right. Clap, Tobias. Clap for Daddy. Yeah. That's right.
The Spirit of God helps us in our weakness because we don't know how to pray as we ought. But He makes intercessions for us with groanings which cannot be uttered. And that was something that struck me during the time in the hospital, during the illness, is that God was not just a distant God, just looking on my suffering, but He's one that comes alongside and groans with us. In our groanings, He's groaning. He identifies with us in our pain. And there were times when all I wanted was, I just wanted Jesus to show up at the end of my bed and just say, I'm here. I wanted Him to appear. I mean, I was in such a desperate state at times that I was just saying, Lord, give me some tangible evidence that you're in this, that you're here, that you're with me. And He didn't. Often it was, He didn't appear to me. I didn't get a vision of Jesus. I wanted something big, and He didn't give me something big. But He gave me small things, like one day I was lying one evening, and some janitor or nurse or someone in the hospital was whistling a tune, and the tune was, He leadeth me, O blessed thought. A little earlier in Romans 8, you have we know that creation groans, and then we know that we groan, we ourselves groan, and then he says, likewise the Spirit groans, and that's the passage that actually meant a lot to me coming out of the experience was the passage in John 11 where Jesus hears that his friend Lazarus is sick, and it says Jesus loved Lazarus and his sisters, and then it says that but Jesus waited a couple days before heading down. And then his disciples, what are we doing? Why are we going down there? They wanted to kill you. And he says, no, but this is for the glory of God. This is for the glory of God. And then what's always struck me is that when Jesus knows He's going to raise Lazarus from the dead, He knows He has that power, and that is going to, that authority, and He's going to do that. But He still weeps. He still weeps with Mary and Martha and all those who are weeping. I was very conscious of the fact that God was absolutely in control. But at the same time, there were moments where I knew that He was weeping with us. He was feeling our pain. Spirit was groaning.